and the passing of Gary England, legend in television meteorology. A lot of the things that a lot of the things that are commonplace that we don't even think twice about doing broadcast meteorology, Gary England invented.
Yeah.
That's not an exaggeration. He invented a lot of the technology that you see on air that we just take for granted. Scotty, I know that you and him shared a kinship. Wanted to throw to you and get your thoughts.
Yeah, we've had Gary on the show, and we're going to show some clips here. I met Gary out in Oklahoma City 2015, so he just retired in 2013, and I was able to just, like you said, strike up a friendship. And Gary was one of those guys who was just funny as funny can get, but he could turn on the serious just like that when it needed to be serious. And like you said, he really was Oklahoma's weatherman for, I would even still say to today, he's Oklahoma's weatherman. And so many folks turned to Gary during difficult times. He covered the May 3rd, 1999 event, the Moore, Oklahoma event in 2013, as well as the El Reno event. And after that El Reno event, that I think it just kind of got to him. And that's when, he decided it's time to hunker or to retire, step away. He still did some things with OU and, it's just a legend. And if you ever watch the movie Twister, the first one, he's the weatherman that you see there at the start of the movie. So just a legend. And I remember so many things being said in our podcast that we've done with him a couple of times. And one of them, and I can't remember the exact term he used, but he did radio before he was on TV. And, on radio, you have to capture that attention. And I think he invented the word thunder boomers, which is now, what people are referred to thunderstorms. That was his caption for thunderstorms and describing what they were like. And then, he would just a very unique, just great guy, and definitely be missed. And when I woke up to the news, Jared, you had shared it in our chat. And then about the time you shared that, Ricky Matthews, a friend of the show, sent me a picture of Gary being on our podcast, and it just kind of went full circle there. But one of the cool things is when he was on our podcast, he wanted me to call him for some reason, make sure everything was set up. And so here I am calling Gary England. He says, "Best Buy, how can I help you?" It's like just a jokester, and just a good guy, and he'll definitely be missed for sure. And I can't go without saying his famous saying, I'm always, and I think we all will appreciate this, it's Friday night in the big town. We're definitely going to miss hearing Gary say that, because that was his famous saying on Friday nights as he was kicking off his newscast. It's Friday night in the big town, and then he would give the forecast for the weekend. So definitely will miss Gary. Just one of a kind, and I don't know that we can ever say thank you enough to someone of Gary, because of all, like you said, Jared, of all of what he's done for us all in this industry.
You mentioned his appearance in Twister. He shared that story with us when you guys talked to him in 2015. Let
me tell you a little story about it. When I got out to California to do some stuff for them, what they do is they're in a big studio and they throw the movie up on a wall there, and you get in front of the microphone and you do your thing. And I was a little scared. I watched Bill Paxton do his, and he's a great guy. And then who was it? Helen Hunt did hers, or Jamie Gertz. Jamie Gertz did her little piece, and they throw up the movie there and they voice over that stuff. And they say, okay, and they say to one of them, "You need to be out of breath." And he'd drop down and do a bunch of push-ups and jump back up and do the voiceover. And I'm watching all this, really enjoying it. And I'm thinking, God, I'm next. I'm just next. And so earlier that day, to go along with this story, they showed me their script. They originally had the script, the tornado was going from Muskogee to northern Oklahoma. All righty? I said, you can't do that. It needs to come from the southwest, all right? They said, they don't care. And so we got it changed. I said, make it come from the southwest. So they revised it. No, I said, what I said to them is use Altus rather than Muskogee. So they had the tornado go from northern Oklahoma to Altus was what they had written in the thing. And finally I said, that's just not the way it works. People will know that that's not right. But when I got out there, they asked me, Jan de Bont, main director, I guess it was, he said, help us make this thing real. He said, so I helped him rewrite the script, quite a bit of stuff there.
And you guys also mentioned, as you were remembering, Gary, his influence on what we do today, both as broadcast meteorologists and everyone at home who looks at a radar on their phone. He was instrumental at developing radar, a military technology for the use of meteorology. here he is describing that story.
Following the research down at Norman, and a friend of mine called, said he worked down there, still works down there. I said, you got to come look at this. So we looked at that big Doppler radar they brought in, that dew line radar, the antenna was about 30 some feet across, and it was designed to pick up missiles and enemy aircraft. And so the guys down at Norman, guys and gals, were converting it to use for warnings. So it looked like to me from the results of their research after a few years, Doppler was the deal. So I talked the owner of the station, Mr. Griffin, into putting up, I think it was $250,000. In those days, that was a ton, man. So just based on my excitement and my belief, he put that money up. I figured I'd lose my career over the deal. And when we got it, I was sure I was going to lose my career. Like 2.5 years later, we ordered it in 78, got it in 81, and it looked like scrambled eggs, man, because, there were no nice computers tied to it to unfold the velocities. And the fold velocity was 32 miles an hour. And I remember looking at that and thinking, my career's over. This guy spent $250,000, and it looks like we bought a bunch of scrambled eggs. But they quickly came out with AFFT, fast Fourier transform processor, and that was just pattern recognition and converted to another type of Doppler. All this time, just interesting things were happening, new cameras, better chase teams. And so it's been an incredible 40 years.
Just watching that clip again, Scotty, the look of delight on your face as you were sitting there on Google Hangouts with Gary England.
All of us have those people you look up to, and Gary was one for me, and I'm sure for a lot of folks who are in the weather industry, no matter on broadcast or National Weather Service, non-traditional meteorologists, and just hearing it. So, I mean, I could sit there in 8 hours and just never get bored and just listen to the stuff that he talked about, and just to know that he's experienced it all. And I hate we didn't get into all of those, but I encourage you to go back to watch that entire episode, because he does get into the major tornado outbreaks and what it was like covering that, knowing that people most likely we're going to lose homes and everything that they own with those massive tornadoes that moved through El Reno and more. And, it really shook him up there towards the end of his career. And, just what a meteorologist out there faces. We've had Damon Lane on before and talking about, covering tornadoes and then one hitting your neighborhood and your house. And it's just, just the stories that they have out there. And Gary definitely has a lot of stories. And so I encourage you to go back and listen to that podcast. I think our folks would really enjoy that.
We've got a QR code on the screen right now. We put the links in the comment and in the description. And if you're listening on our audio podcast feed, this episode is so old, I don't think it's actually even available if you were to scroll all the way back to 2015 on our audio podcast feed, which is to say, we're going to drop it again. So you'll see high up on your subscription list an episode drop. It'll be our 2015 audio-only conversation with Gary England. So what a life, what a legacy, what an influence, a lasting influence he had on what we do today and what we will be doing going forward, and our thoughts with his friends, his family, his coworkers, and everyone out there in Oklahoma City. I'm sure many viewers felt and feel like they lost a member of their family.
And one other thing is Oklahoma City is a very dynamic TV market.
Mm-hmm.
To say the least. But when you have meteorologists from other stations who were on TV the same time Gary was, talking about how fantastic he was and about what he's done for the community, that speaks a lot. And so it definitely has affected a lot of folks in the weather community with the loss of Gary today.
Yes, you mentioned Damon Lane, and he posted, like you, a picture of himself with Gary on Facebook today, and there it is. Competitors and friends all at the same time.
Michael Armstrong also, if you watch on, or if you follow on social media, Michael Armstrong has a great post. Michael was working shoulder to shoulder with Gary during the two big tornado events in 2013, and Michael's got some powerful stories about those nights. And so I encourage you to look up his post too, because it'll really show you who Gary is.
You can find those there on Facebook and the like. So we will leave it there. I hope you guys get a chance to check out that conversation we had with Gary. Some great stories, some great insights from our Carolina Weather Group Deep Vault archives.